Hello, and welcome to the Where People Meet podcast, the event technology podcast for the worldwide meetings and events industry. I'm your host, Mitch Malinsky, head of sales here at Feedloop, and today I'm joined by the one and only Maneesha Manges, Chief Experience Officer at HighRoad Solutions. Now, HighRoad Solutions is a technology enablement company, and their aim is to help associations to leverage tech-enabled marketing, membership recruitment, and retention solutions to grow their organization. Maneesha herself brings a wealth of expertise and experience to the table today, with more than 20 years of evolving experience in the B2B marketing space. Now, many event planners are wondering how they can use marketing to stand out from the crowd and grow their events. We see a lot of the same old drag and drop marketing tactics being employed year after year. So today, I'm really excited to tap into Maneesha's expertise to see if we can uncover any new and exciting marketing strategies for the wonderful Where People Meet audience to consider. Now, Maneesha, as I'm sure you can tell, I'm really excited to get started here. But before we dive in, do you mind just giving us a quick overview, telling us a bit about yourself and where you're calling in from today?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mitch. I'm excited to be here. So my background is in the world of digital, basically. I have an undergrad in economics, so that's my, I think, right brain, really kind of tapping into modeling and data and patterns. And then I've got an MBA in high-tech marketing. And so I've spent a lot of my career just watching behaviors and looking for patterns to surface so that you can do something with them. And so what's really exciting about marketing today is the digital aspect, right? There's now a lot of technology and a lot of data and a lot of pieces that can be brought together really easily so that you can react to them. And that's what's really interesting is that marketing has changed very much from the, I have a message, I'm going to put it on my billboard, I'm going to wait for you to come, to very much like, not intrusive, but certainly it can be preemptive, as in I can anticipate now where you're going or what you're looking for based on your visiting patterns, based on the keywords you're looking for and searching, which allows me to actually create a better personalized experience. And I think that's what really is changing kind of in the events world, especially from an event marketing perspective, of really trying to understand who to market to and what they're looking for and what they're anticipating, and putting that in front of them before they get to a point of telling you, oh, I want to do this, or I'm looking for these sessions, or I'm looking to get accreditation or things like that. And I think that's what's really, that's what drives me. And that's what I'm passionate about. At HighRoad, our entire team is kind of focused on really leveraging the data that's available in all these different systems and figuring out ways to activate it so that you're optimizing the use of your tools so that you can do something more other than just send out an email.
Amazing. Now, there's a lot to unpack here. I want to learn more about HighRoad Solutions and what your team does. I want to learn more about marketing for events specifically. But before we do so, just want to get to know you a little bit better. Personally, what is it that appeals to you about marketing? Why did you decide to center your career around marketing as a field?
Yeah, I think it's just the access to information that it's less about ones and zeros now and just really a transformation of data. So it's really tied to behavioral stuff, right? So really collecting insights and really trying to anticipate and understand what drives people and what their behaviors are, right? So I have a tendency, if I didn't go into economics, I probably would have gone into psychology. And so I like the idea of probably just kind of seeing what people are doing and anticipating or guessing, some people call it speculation, but just really kind of thinking about, why did you spend so much time on this area of the website and nothing on this when I thought I had enough information there to get you there, right? And so I find like humans, that's what's so fascinating about humans. We're not predictable, even though we are, right? And so it's that unpredictability that if you figure out that formula, it's really exciting because you can do really cool things with it. And I think just, again, like where we are today, there's just so much access to data that's actually accessible. And it wasn't like that. Like maybe even 5 years ago, you couldn't tap into things. And that's one of the things that we do at HighRoad is really, we work just with associations and nonprofits. And, the systems that they use, they've been built over time. So very kind of customized, and it's not so easy to extract some of what you would think would be simple. But what we figured out how to do is kind of extract that and make it accessible so that we can put it into digital marketing platforms so you can do something with it. And so that's what really kind of drives us, and that's what we specialize in. And that's why we get into kind of the activation and just talking about marketing tactics and really strategy to kind of push people forward.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I would like to dive into HighRoad Solutions a bit more. And I'm guessing the majority of the audience doesn't know all of the various services that you offer and the type of clientele that you're best suited for. So can we start there? Can we highlight what you do at HighRoad, the various options and service offerings you have, and then who would be a good fit? Because there may be potential listeners that might want to reach out and leverage some of your services.
Sure. So, like I said, we work exclusively with the association and nonprofit market, and I oversee the client experience team. So underneath me, I've got a services team that specializes in digital marketing tactics. And what that means is we kind of touch into, or we straddle kind of the technicalities of data, ones and zeros, but we also touch into what someone on my team calls the squishy stuff. Right. So again, really thinking about the attributes and the likes and dislikes and really getting into personas. So that's one of the packages that we do, which is we facilitate kind of a conversation about saying, who's your ideal member, right? Or who is your ideal event attendee? What are they looking for? What are they challenged with kind of in their professional development, in their professional world? How do they learn, right? Like, what do they like and dislike? And really trying to stand up a typical kind of ideal attendee, and then saying, what kind of content do you have that would be interesting so that you can seed them through kind of a marketing funnel and get them to register or to participate or volunteer. And so we spend a lot of time, again, doing data analysis and really understanding what data is accessible and kind of creating data sets that can be used in a certain way so that you can create journeys so people then can actually follow them through and actually purchase or buy or register or attend.
So a lot of what you're doing is helping the client to create personas and then storylines that will resonate to those personas, so that instead of just doing one broad sweeping marketing campaign, you're developing very distinct and targeting messaging. And as a salesperson, I know that that's the real recipe for success is getting tailoring the messaging. Okay. All right. That's really interesting. Now, a buzzword I saw plastered all over your website is marketing automation. And I think this can take us down a lot of different avenues, but to you and your team over at HighRoad, can you help us understand what exactly marketing automation means? And then specifically for associations, how do they go about implementing a marketing automation strategy to either grow membership or to get more eyes on an upcoming event or something along those lines?
Yeah, sure. So strangely enough, I feel like marketing automation is actually a misnomer. It is not the automation of marketing practices per se, because it doesn't as you said, it's a buzz term. But what it really is, sometimes it can be seen as a philosophy, but what it really is, it's a set of tools or a platform that allows you to do omni-channel marketing. And omni-channel, again, back in the day, and this wasn't so far back, right? But back in the day, it was very simple because people had access to email. And that was the only channel really to kind of communicate with people in aggregate or at the individual level. But now, if you think about your own kind of browsing, buying behaviors today, your journey, right, might start on your phone. Eventually, it'll end up on multiple websites, and you may complete your transaction on your laptop or your desktop, or it might be the reverse, right? And so really what marketing automation is about is an acknowledgement of trying to market to and sell your programming and services and whatever it is that you want to the user wherever they are in the buyer's journey. And what that means is, right, it's kind of understanding that we've got multiple generations in the market. who all purchase and consider and research very differently than, say, kind of one specific, like, homogenous group of people, right? And so that means that wherever they are, whether they're ready to buy today or maybe 3 days from now, you want to be in a position to put in the right message to convince them that you've got something that they need. And so it's very much, again, it's putting materials and campaigns and content to establish trust and confidence, because you're not in control. Your end user, your recipient, they're the ones driving the car. And so marketing automation, those tools, that technology allows you to do this at kind of a larger scale, right? So, for example, I could be searching to look for an event that I want to register for, and I choose the way in which I kind of enter that entire process is by doing a search. I may land on a couple of pages, I may get to a couple of websites, and then I decide, you know what, I've been sidetracked by some sort of review or posting, and now I've taken the journey onto my phone. And so these tools basically allow companies, allow organizations to say, oh yeah, this is one user who started the journey here using a Google search engine, right? Using Google or another search engine to find her way to a product page or an event microsite page that tells you about the event. Whereas you, Mitch, you might actually be browsing on the actual site itself, right? You already know the organization who's running the show, and you're already on the site. So you didn't choose to search, right, through paid advertising or anything like that. You're just browsing the website. And what's different is that what the individuals might kind of experience are based on those browsing behaviors. Whereas I'm looking for searches, and I might be on multiple sites, and now I've got I've got ads following my journey, right? I've got retargeting in there to remind me, hey, don't forget, you said you were interested in this event. For you, your experiences, you're spending a lot of time on the actual individual pages reading the content, right? And so you might experience more like a pop-up ad on the site saying, hey, I think, we've got a new keynote added to our conference. Here's a discount code because you came to our event last year, right? You need data for that. And that's what marketing automation tools and platforms do. They kind of arm your marketers with all these different pieces so that you can construct a journey that makes sense for that individual, but you're doing it for multiple individuals at the same time.
Right. So it's really about keeping the product, the event, whatever it is you're trying to market, top of mind, so that everywhere they look, they're getting constant reminders about that product or event or whatever it is. Is my understanding correct?
That is exactly right. Because if you think about how many tabs you have open in your on a browser, right? Like there's a lot of distractions, right? Like, yeah. And that's what's really changed. And on top of that, now you've got your mobile device, right? So you've got a phone and you're multitasking. And so this is an opportunity to put meaningful information in front of an individual, just acknowledging that everyone is unique and they have different interests and they have different goals, and really trying to tailor that. So you're really marketing to a market of one.
Got it. Great. Well, this has been really insightful. And what I'd like to do next is take a bit of a deeper look at marketing around events specifically. And there's really two areas that I want to get your opinion on. First is, how do events fit into the broader marketing strategy of an organization? And then from there, I'd like to go a layer deeper and just see how event planners can better market their events. So before we tackle that latter question, can we start with the first? How do events fit into the broader marketing strategy of an association or one of the organizations that you help to manage?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. So really, events kind of stand as a pillar for non-dues revenue for most associations and organizations, right? An opportunity to create, again, adds value, right? It's a kind of a positioning value statement for the organization. And really, it's an opportunity to bring a lot of people together, those who may know intimately what the organization does and those who may not. And so what's really neat from a marketing perspective is you don't get like a single segment of attendees. They kind of span the full spectrum, right? So you might get members, existing members. You might get future members, student members. You might get a lot of alumni, right? Previous past members. And on top of that, it's almost like you're using it as a cultivation to actually create opportunities for people to move into membership. So what's really neat about event marketing in particular is that there's a lot of potential because you're not necessarily marketing to just one segment of users that have, all similar traits, right? It could be used as prospecting for memberships. It could be used for prospecting for other certification campaigns or programming. So it's really a cool opportunity to see what you can do with that. And right, so from an event marketing perspective, there's a lot of potential because you have an opportunity to really showcase the value of your events based on kind of who's coming and who might be interested in what you have to offer.
Right. And I think there's a lot of potential for the whole community side of things where you and your team aren't necessarily doing all of the legwork there, but just by getting people together in a shared space and having your members interacting and talking with non-members, I think that in itself just markets and does a lot of the selling for you. So yeah, I can totally see how the whole event side of things is a really critical marketing pillar for associations and some of these organizations.
Yeah. And what's really interesting now is the kind of value and insights that you get from behavioral, like in-person interactions, as well as the virtual, right? So I think that what's changed is that, over the past 3 years ago, we all were forced to go into this virtual environment, whether we were ready or not. With that came an extra ton of data for a lot of additional insights to say, this is how people choose to interact when an actual session is actually running, right? There's a lot more opportunity. If you're in person, you want to be respectful of whoever's speaking, so you keep quiet. But you can also see a lot of people on their phones, either tweeting or doing something, and kind of moving into that virtual or hybrid environment where you've got some people at their desk, not physically there, but also participating, just gives you a really additional sense of community. And it actually helps with scoring, right? The engagement, right? Because I think one of the things that we see a lot of is a lot of surveys and questions post-event, post-session, saying how was the speaker, how was the content, how was the environment, but you don't really see a lot of the results or answers worked back into stuff. If it is, it's worked back into the event that happens for next year, but not necessarily for like that immediate kind of post-event follow-up or engagement where you can say like, hey, this speaker's talked about the following things. They didn't have enough time, or there was a really good question at the very end of the session, and there wasn't really enough time to delve into it deeper. We've got a ton of material around this specifically. And if you're interested, let us know. And maybe we can do like a mini kind of impromptu webinar or a meetup to kind of do that and follow through. And the whole name of the game is really trying to understand engagement and building up that engagement all year around. Because it's really, events are very kind of peak and valley. We talk about the engagement valley, and that's really like everyone's leading up to the event. It's really exciting. We're all prepared to be there in person or not, or just interact with each other and build that sense of community. And immediately after the event, everyone starts talking about next year, but we don't have to start talking about next year. We could kind of keep the conversation flowing by really kind of evening out that event valley, that event engagement valley, by starting to say like, hey, let's have a couple more conversations digitally online. Let's do something else that gets a little bit more of engagement. And again, you're always capturing insights to see what works and what doesn't. So it's a real opportunity. And that's why marketers get so passionate about that.
I completely agree. It's one of the big benefits we saw with virtual events is event planners taking the concept of a typical conference and expanding on it. So instead of viewing it as, hey, we've got the 3-day annual conference, we're going to do this messaging leading up to it, we've got the conference, and then it's wrapped and over until next year. What we saw with the pandemic is they do pre-event road shows and webinars, bringing in speakers every month or every week to build some hype up to the conference. They would do the of course, the typical live 3-day conference run virtually during the pandemic. And then what we saw a lot of our clients do here at Feedloop is they would take that content, all of the recordings, they'd upload it back into the portal for on-demand viewing after the event. But then they would then host a monthly webinar or a follow-up session on topics that people found really interesting at the event but wanted to learn more about. So I find it very interesting that you do see that trend and the value in taking the event, but really expanding it. And it doesn't have to be just engagement centered around those 3 days on site. This can be kind of like a year-round community portal and a means for fostering that dialogue.
Yeah, and what I think is really interesting, and you hit on it, which is it's almost like you have a built-in content engine because you are having everyone create content that before in the past for an in-person, you had to wait until kind of the distribution at the live event. Whereas now events in general have that ready-made content engine where you can take something that's been created prior to or as a video or something and then cut it, slice it up, and then create a series of content pieces that can then be used to nurture all of those individuals after the fact or leading up to it. And that's really where we start to see the value of marketing automation really kind of start to merge really well with event marketing. And it's really from that perspective, right? Everyone might have heard of terms like drip campaigns, nurturing campaigns, and all of those are really just mechanics to say, I know you don't have a lot of time. I know your time is pressed. I know the way in which you now consume information and content is very different. You need bite-sized stuff, you need more kind of snackable content or video, digital content. I'm going to figure out who you are, what your interests are. I'm going to overlay on top of that some of the content that you might find interesting, and then I'm going to parse it out to you. And I can either choose to parse it out to you based on like just a simple time sequence, right? Like once a week, once a month, once a quarter, a couple times, or I can set it up in such a way so that it actually gets delivered to you based on what you're actually doing with me as an organization at this moment in time, right? So you can work into it some of the triggers that naturally evolve of, hey, right? Like we are running this particular webinar. You may be interested in more content that will be coming and will be showcasing at our in-person event. And you've demonstrated that interest by either downloading something, right? You've already got a PDF or some sort of toolkit or something you're interested in, or you're accessing a certain number of pages, or you've submitted a request for information. All of those things that you're submitting, now the organization is taking advantage of the fact of, oh, you meet this criteria. Let's just go ahead and put you into something that makes us super helpful, and we become part of, your daily value add, right? And so again, you think about the technology. Can you do it manually? Sure. If you have a team and a staff that's sitting around doing nothing, which we know that is never the case anymore. And so this is where the technology kind of comes into play. And so it's really powerful because now you've got a lot more overlap and a lot more potential for any kind of upsell or engagement or recruitment or anything along those lines.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I know my team takes advantage of automated workflows where, all right, if somebody does this, then it triggers this to happen in our CRM. They get dripped this piece of content, or someone on the team manually reaches out. We actually use that a lot here at Feedloop. But I would like to peel back this last layer, and I'd like to ask you specifically for events. Why is marketing an event such a critical step? And from what you've seen over the years, what are the do's, what are the don'ts when it comes to event marketing specifically?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think there's a tendency to communicate or engage with those users who have attended year over year or who are known to us. And so not a lot of potential to explore other opportunities or other individuals who may not be part of kind of the current environment. And so marketing really becomes key because now what you're doing is you're trying to grow your audience. Because then there are a lot of different options now on the table. You have more competitors, you have more, less money, less budgets, right? Travel budgets have tightened up. So people are realizing there are other opportunities out there to either get, what they're looking for, from a networking perspective or from an educational perspective. And so you can't count on your base audience to remain the same. You've got to do what you need to do to prevent it from shrinking, but in fact, you're probably tasked with growing it, right? And so it's not unusual to see that the events teams, right? So of course, there's the event planning team or management team, but the other half of the events team where they've been tasked with hitting certain revenue numbers or saying, we've got to show 5%, 10% growth year over year. And the reality is, again, because our audiences are not one homogenized group, they're all very different, and you've got to keep things appealing to them. So if you're lucky, you have a lot of people who come year over year because this is the event that they need to attend for their professional development or for their personal goals or professional goals, right? But that's assuming you've got a ready-made audience that's captive and that is never going to change over time. And very much similar to the statistics out there of basically saying email addresses on a list, they degrade over time. It's very much the same thing, right? You've got to remain appealing to that base audience. And then really to kind of offset any losses, you've got to grow and you've got to get more people into the event. And so that's why it's so important now, because marketers now have to help from an event marketing perspective, go look for new audiences who will recognize the value and come to your event.
And are there any strategies you would recommend for that? Like, are there any strategies or initiatives you employ with your clients at HighRoad Solutions that works really well for helping to grow your audience and tap into new audiences?
Yeah, and it's actually something that I guess is common sense, but because we're so focused on the execution of things, right, we see organizations rarely go back to looking at their previous event data and doing some data mining. Doing some straight up data analysis to say, can we cross set or do a subsection and see who comes year over year, who are early bird registrants, when there is a very kind of short time frame in the last week of the event, how many registrants do you get? Are they local? Are they out of towners? Does that make a difference? Who are the speakers that get the most kind of people in the room? What are those surveys, right? Those post-event follow-up surveys, what are they really saying? Does price make a difference, right? All of those things inform you and tell you, one, about how things are going, and then also help you evaluate whether you should do the same tactic again, right? So again, we see a lot of emphasis on email communications going out the door. It's very much a standard kind of 4 email type of a cadence where I've got my first email just telling them save the date. I've got my second email telling them at a later time frame that, hey, early bird registration is going to open up. Then I've got my final, I guess closer to the event, I've got my don't forget to register and last call for registration, that kind of thing. So it's usually kind of a 4 email cadence series. And if you think about it, you really want to go back and see how effective they are. There's a perception that if we need to up our numbers, just send another email. That may work maybe once, but if you think about how many times or how many emails you get in an approximate period of time, it's not the most effective way to get a guaranteed result. And so what we talk about is basically kind of overlaying, what do you know about the value that your event brings? And then who do we have on the docket that we need to market to or speak to in a different way? So it's almost like coming up with personas for, again, that ideal target audience, the ones that you want to pursue versus the ones that come year over year. I have gone as far as kind of suggesting, why are we doing early bird registration, right? Like, why do we have to do that? Why not just not do it, or carve out for your members or your event attendees that come year over year, 5 years, every year, give them a discount, right? Reach out to them individually, give them a discount, and have them register, but don't leave money on the table when it comes to early bird registration, right? So there are other opportunities and tactics, but yeah, one of the ones that we rely heavily on to kind of guide the conversations is really about going back and looking at your event data set over a period of time and seeing like what's surfacing and more about like what have you not done that might have a positive impact in growing some of your event attendance.
Yeah, this has been a really incredible conversation, Maneesha. You've shared a lot of actionable tips and takeaways that I think the audience is going to get a lot of value out of. For me personally, the biggest takeaway I have is leverage your data. Instead of doing one spray and pray marketing approach, try to develop a few different personas and groups of people who you're trying to market to, and then tailor your messaging, tailor your outreach to them, similar to being a good salesperson. So for me, this has been a really amazing conversation. I'm very grateful to have you on board. I imagine some of the audience is going to want to learn a bit more about you. So if you have any final words before we wrap up here, and if you don't have any final words, can you tell the audience where they can go to learn more about you, HighRoad Solutions, and connect with you on some of the work that you do?
Yeah, sure. What I would say is I would encourage everyone to think about approaching things in a different way. Don't be scared to try something, even if it's new, right? We are humans. We like being in our comfort zone. We have a tendency to backslide into doing things because, one, it's easy or we know it's working or effective. What's really neat now is that you can change up really quickly from a strategy perspective, and you can execute something, run a campaign quickly and course correct, or try something different. And don't shy away from trying something different. I think what's really interesting now is that for the audiences that we're all targeting, they're far more forgiving if you're trying to be a little bit more personalized. They're less forgiving if you're sticking to a tried and true practice that they actually don't appreciate or they don't respond to, right? Yeah. And so I think that's really key. And I think that will actually generate some surprising results. And so we have a blog on our website, so we encourage all of you to kind of visit us at highroadsolutions.com, where we talk about some of the tactics that we take. You can look me up on LinkedIn. We run webinars to talk about different tactics, but start anywhere with something, even if it's an email that doesn't seem to perform that well, change it. Right? It's just one email. It's not going to ruin the world. People aren't going to get that upset if you try something new. I think it's more important to try something and see what happens.
For sure. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I love that. Well, Maneesha, again, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I know the audience is going to get great value out of this. But to the listeners, that wraps up our Where People Meet podcast episode on how to market your event with Maneesha Manges from HighRoad Solutions. Thanks for your time today, everyone, and we'll see you next time on the Where People Meet podcast.